it's about performance. Oh, it's about performance. Yes, it's about performance. It's about performance back on the job.
Hi, this is Guy Wallace, your host for the Pursuing Performance podcast. Thank you for joining me. Today I'd like to talk about communications. Is there really such a thing? As in my 2000 article for ISPI's News and Notes, back when I was a director on their board, I wrote an article about communications and that basically there's no such thing as communications. Not communications with zero defects, anyway. So let me riff a little bit on that while I scan the article in focus. First of all, the definition of communications is basically the message sent is the message received. Well, that's my definition. The American Heritage Dictionary defines communications as the exchange of thoughts, messages, or information as by speech, signals, writing, or behavior. Communications and communicating connotes that the message intended was the message received. But really, how often does that happen with zero defects? I believe if we started with the premise that there's no such thing as communications, that we can never achieve zero defects in our communications, we will then be on the road to better communications, nirvana communications. The issue is that most often there's a variance between that message sent and the message received. And as there's no such thing as zero defects in a world full of variation, which is something that I learned from the quality experts at Motorola when I was a Motorola Training and Education Center employee, I was serving manufacturing, materials, and purchasing functions across the board. In that job, I got a project to do a win-win negotiations program based on the Huthwaite program of the same name. Of course, we had to Motorolize it, as it was called. My target audiences were purchasing agents, plus sales representatives, plus contract negotiators. You know, those people who sold black boxes to the government, 1 or 2 or 3 at a time for millions and millions of dollars each. Negotiations was important to all of these audiences, but in their specific workflows, which of course varied vastly between the three. So this was an enabling knowledge and skills that somebody would have to learn and then have to go retrofit it back into their own organization's processes, what's today known as workflows. What the people learned in the pilot session was applicable in many situations in their various workflows in their professional life as well as in their personal life, which is what I found myself doing. I was scoring my communications behaviors as I was having communications with my family, with my friends, with my staff, with my clients, and with my prospects. But the issue here is the variances between the message sent and the message received. And really, it's up to the sender, in my opinion, who thought it was important enough to send a message. Their responsibility is to ensure that what was sent was received. It shouldn't be on the receiver, but they are the ones, of course, most often blamed. And maybe it's not with zero defects that the communications happen, but with a small variance that makes the whole exchange robust to those variances. Now, Huthwaite was known back then for spin selling, as Neil Rackham, the inventor of spin selling, was the principal at Huthwaite way back in 1981. The book on spin selling hadn't come out yet, but I had attended some spin selling training sessions and listened to some audio cassettes of Neil doing his thing, as well as then visiting England to observe the facilitator for negotiations training for Huthwaite, who was John Carlisle. John and I and another Huthwaite associate restructured their program slightly. We, had to Motorolize it. It became a 3-day program that we piloted in the Phoenix area. Back then, Motorola was the top employer of all of Arizona, so we had to kind of go there because that was the center of the universe and not Schaumburg, Illinois, where headquarters was at. Again, there were 11 or 13 different communications behaviors in either the spin selling program or the win-win negotiations program. But of course, there was tremendous overlap. I took just 4 of those communications behaviors and focused on those myself, again, in my own personal dealings with family and friends and with my staff and with our clients and with prospects. I started imagining and scoring my communications behaviors in the moment as I was doing it, which is what I had been trained to do by Neil Rackham as an observer for the negotiation pilot test I participated in, coordinated, scheduled, blah, blah, blah. So this was all very eye-opening. The 4 behaviors that I focused on after that were focused on either giving information or seeking information or testing understanding or summarizing. Of course, the communicator gives information. A great communicator gives information and then tests for understanding of the recipients of the message to ensure that the message sent was the message received. We need to make sure that the message sent was message received well enough, given the consequences, given the stakes, given the risks and rewards at stake. So giving information is pretty self-explanatory. Seeking information is also. Testing, understanding, and then summarizing are a little bit different, but they are somewhat similar in nature. I test for understanding sometimes by summarizing in a question form. Do I have this right? Blah, 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 blah. And then, do I have that right again? Double checking, of course. Another aspect of this that, again, I learned from Neil Rackham, who was my trainer when I learned to become an observer, and I had to watch the negotiators in their practice exercises do their thing, and I had to score how many times did they give information or seek information or test understanding or summarize or any of the other communications behaviors. It was quite a chore to learn that. One of the other things that I learned from Neil in all of this is that when I was changing communications behaviors, I should announce my intent. I should preview it with something that tags it, such as, let me give you some information here, or let me ask a question or two, or let me test my understanding to see if I have this right, or let me try and summarize what we're talking about here and see if you agree. See, again, summarizing is akin to the testing of understanding. I've written about this in articles in the past and in books, and I've cooked this into a whole bunch of training programs that I designed and developed based on the analysis that showed that communications were a key fulcrum in performance. This is so important, especially to facilitators who, like myself, would be using some version of what I call a facilitated group process. I've kind of standardized my approach in the methodologies for meeting with groups, meeting with individuals, as in here's what you do and say, and this is the data you're trying to elicit, or the data you're trying to confirm or amend as appropriate in a review process. So you're doing a lot of giving information, seeking information, testing, understanding, and summarizing when you're working with individuals and or with groups. Now, isn't that an enabling knowledge and skill set for almost everyone in almost every one of their processes or workflows? See the show notes for some free references. And thanks for listening. Cheers.
It's about performance. Oh, it's about performance. Yes, it's about performance. It's about performance back on the job. It's about performance.